All right, welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're sort of peeling back the layers on music production, looking at how messy it can sometimes get, all through a producer's own story.
Yeah, and we're focusing specifically on the making of an album with country singer-songwriter Joe Sun. Now, Joe Sun, he wasn't exactly unknown.
No, it's definitely not.
Our source mentions, major labels like Ovation, Elektra. He had 14 singles on the Hot Country charts, 15 albums, lots of touring.
Right, Budweiser ads, TV spots, even acted in that movie Marie with Sissy Spacek and Morgan Freeman.
And interestingly, later on, he actually produced 2 Grammy-nominated foreign albums himself in '89 and '90. So he knew the ropes.
He definitely knew the business from both sides. But this deep dive isn't focusing on those Grammy projects.
No.
Our source is actually some excerpts from a producer's memoir looking at a pretty challenging time recording a different Joe Sun album back in the mid-'80s.
Exactly. So our mission today is really to unpack the story from this producer's view. The personality clashes, the unexpected problems, how they worked around things.
And see what it tells us about making music, especially when things don't go quite as planned.
Yeah, the reality behind the record.
Okay, so let's jump right in. Where does this story start? Early 84.
Early 1984. The producer, Kenny Denton, gets a call from Sonnet Records. They want him for a Joe Sun album, recording in Nashville.
Okay. And Kenny had this personal rule, right? Something about meeting the artist first.
He did, yeah. He felt it was really important, wherever possible, to meet them face-to-face first, just to see if there was a creative spark, if they could actually click.
Like a vibe check before diving in. Makes sense. So he was in Nashville anyway and sets up a meeting with Joe Sun, Maxwell House Hotel.
That's it. But let's just say the meeting didn't kick off smoothly.
Oh.
What happened?
Well, Kenny's in his hotel room. Joe calls from the lobby, says he's coming up. Kenny opens the door, and he's faced with this really big guy. The memoir calls him stature of an American football player.
Okay, imposing figure.
And before Kenny can barely get a hello out,
Joe just walks right past him into the room and hits him with, "What does an English guy like you know about country music?"
wow. Okay. Straight for the confrontation. How did Kenny even respond to that?
Well, Kenny's thinking, nice to meet you too, But what he actually says is pretty clever. He goes, nowhere near as much as you do, but that's not my job. Your job is to know the music. My job is to bring out the best in you.
Huh. That's actually a really good answer. Acknowledges Joe's turf, but defines his own role clearly. Did it work?
Seems like it cut through some of the ice, yeah. The memoir says the next few hours were a bit less strained after that.
Okay, so they got past that hurdle. What was next? Hearing the music.
Right. The next day, Kenny goes over to Joe's place to hear the songs Joe had written for the album.
And Kenny picked up on something interesting musically, didn't he? A Jerry Reed connection.
Yeah, he heard shades of Jerry Reed, who Kenny really liked, wrote those Elvis hits, Guitar Man, U.S. Mail. So there was maybe some common ground there.
But Joe's presentation was something else.
Oh, yeah. After playing each song, Joe would apparently lean back and declare, now that's one hell of a great song.
Yep.
Every single time.
Seriously.
Yep. Kenny's thinking, not sure I totally agree. But he did feel there was, some solid material to work with.
Right. So potential there, but maybe a bit of ego involved.
A bit. Kenny describes Joe's ego, while driving to the Blueberry Cafe later, as being larger than Carnegie Hall.
Larger than Carnegie Hall. Okay. So they agreed Joe would get Kenny a tape. Kenny would send some UK songs over. Things felt maybe a tiny bit easier.
A little, yeah. Kenny was starting to feel he could maybe work with him, despite the rough start and, well, the ego. Then they went to the Bluebird Cafe.
Ah, the legendary Bluebird. The memoir describes it right. Famous listening room in Green Hills.
Exactly. World-renowned spot where songwriters play their own stuff. Been there 39 years at that point. Really intimate.
They got there early, got good seats at the bar, saw some up-and-comers, then Joe Sun played. How'd he do?
He performed well, confidently. Crowd seemed to like him. Everything seemed fine until the break.
Uh-oh. What happened during the break?
They're still at the bar, and this guy approaches Kenny. Described as looking like a, quote, troublesome redneck, locks eyes with Kenny, and just says flat out, I'm kind of in the frame of mind to punch you in the face.
Whoa! Just like that, out of the blue. What did Kenny do?
He knew he had to de-escalate fast. He decides to try humor, asks the guy if he wrote the sign over the door.
What sign?
Kenny made one up on the spot, saying something like, hey, pick up your teeth, come on in, and let's be friends, and you can buy me a beer, we can make amends.
That's risky. Didn't land.
The guy just sort of grunted. The memoir says it was almost like laughter hidden beneath a cough. So Kenny seized the moment, offered to buy him a beer.
Smart move. Okay, but while all this is going down, where's Joe's son, the guy Kenny's actually there with?
That's the kicker. According to the source, Joe was right there, saw the whole thing starting, and just turned away. Started networking, chatting with other people, left Kenny completely hanging for the whole 5 minutes.
No backup whatsoever. That says a lot, doesn't it?
It really does. It speaks volumes about the dynamic, or maybe the lack of one at that point. Kenny felt totally alone. He had to talk his way out of it himself.
So he kept the humor going.
Yeah.
Mentioned being a bad boxer.
Yeah, kept riffing, saying he was a lover, not a fighter, told some joke about having advertising on the soles of his shoes as a boxer, just trying to keep it light.
Did it eventually work? Did the guy back off?
By the third beer Kenny bought him, the tension eased. Then the next performer started, and the guy just kind of melted back into the crowd, gone.
Crisis averted. But Kenny had a thought about it later, didn't he? About Joe's lack of action.
He did. He wondered afterwards if maybe Joe had set the whole thing up, like a test, to see how this English producer handled himself in a tough spot in Nashville.
That certainly adds another layer of weirdness to their working relationship right from the start.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So, okay, they survived the Bluebird incident. Now it's time to actually plan the recording sessions.
Right. Kenny gets back in touch with Joe after the Nashville trip, arranges to get the song tape.
Materials confirmed, dates are set. They book Glazer Sound Studios in Nashville.
And they line up Augie Myers, the keyboard player?
Yep, contacted him in New York. He was enthusiastic, ready to go. Kenny scheduled a couple of days for rehearsals before the session started. Augie flew in the night before, and they rehearsed 4 songs with Joe's actual touring band, Solar System.
Okay, sounds like a plan finally coming together. They did the union paperwork, too.
Spent a good chunk of the day before sessions at the musicians' union office, yeah. Getting all the contracts and agreements sorted, especially with Kenny being from the UK and Augie from New York.
All right, seems like they're prepped and ready to roll. First day at Glazer Sound Studios. How did it go?
Well, the memoir uses the phrase chaos descends, so not great.
Oh boy, what went wrong first?
Kenny gets there early, looks at the setup. The engineer has the drums right out in the middle of the main room. No isolation booth.
And that's bad because...
Because the drum sound bleeds everywhere, into every other microphone. Makes it a nightmare to mix later because you can't isolate the other instruments properly. It's basic stuff, really.
So Kenny has to fix the engineer's setup right off the bat.
Yep, starts moving mics around. Then he realizes the engineer's working really slowly, like way too slow for the budget they have.
Oh no, what did he do?
He had to make a really tough call, something he says he'd never done before. He went to the studio manager and asked for a different engineer.
Ouch, that's awkward. But necessary, I guess. Did things improve then?
Well, that problem was addressed, but then the musicians started showing up.
Let me guess. Not Solar System.
Exactly. Completely different guys. Kenny was apparently so confused he double-checked if he was even at the right studio.
I don't blame him. What was going on?
And to top it off, the drummer who did show up was only booked for the morning session. They'd need to stop, break down, and set up for another drummer later. Total mess.
So when Joe finally arrives, Kenny must have been beside himself.
Completely bewildered. He asked Joe, what's happening here? Why aren't we using your band? We just rehearsed with them.
And Joe's reason?
Joe basically says, you don't get it. This record needs big Nashville session names on it for credibility. I can't use my road band.
The rehearsals! Why rehearse with Solar System if you never plan to use them?
That's exactly what Kenny asked. And Joe's reply, according to Kenny, was just dripping with condescension. He said, so you can hear what the songs sounded like with a band.
Unbelievable. Just zero communication. Pulled the rug right out from under the producer.
Totally. Kenny felt completely blindsided. His whole plan, the rehearsals, all out the window. And then adding insult to injury.
Right.
He finds the engineer he just had replaced, sitting in the lounge.
Right.
Feels awful, apologizes, explains it was a budget thing, not personal. And then he sees the guy has 3 gold records on the wall for working on Elvis albums.
Oh, man. That must have felt terrible. Talk about awkward.
Yeah. And then Augie Myers arrives, the keyboard player from New York.
Right.
Apparently, he starts feeling some friction from the local Nashville players. A bit of that we don't like outsiders vibe. Maybe because he was from Texas originally.
More tension. So what did Kenny do with Augie?
He basically told Augie, look, maybe just hang out in the control room for now, lay your parts down later, just to avoid any more drama on the studio floor.
And the new engineer. Was he any better?
Different problem.
Yeah.
This guy apparently kept saying, that's the greatest thing I ever heard.
Mm.
After almost every single take. Looking for approval, Kenny had to keep shutting down, like, no, we need to do that again.
So just constant battles on all fronts. Technical issues, personnel surprises, communication breakdowns, interpersonal friction.
Pretty much sums up the Nashville sessions, yeah. A real trial by fire.
Yeah.
Somehow, though, they got the basic tracks and Joe's lead vocals recorded.
Okay, so after all that, Joe starts lining up backing vocalists.
He does. And Kenny sees a small chance here. He suggests, hey, why don't we bring in your band, Solar System, to do the backing vocals?
His reasoning being,
Well, first, they actually knew the songs and the harmonies from the rehearsals they did. And second, it would help the band sound more like the record when they toured it. Makes sense, right?
yeah, absolutely. Did Joe go for it?
Reluctantly, apparently.
Yeah.
But he agreed.
And how did the band react when they finally got called in?
They were thrilled, just grateful for the chance to be involved at all.
Yeah.
Kenny couldn't help but mention to them, guys, you really should have been playing on the whole thing.
A bit of validation for them, I guess. So Nashville is finally wrapped up somehow. What's the next move?
Kenny gets back to the UK and basically decides this isn't working. He calls the Sonnet execs in Sweden, Dag and Gunnar.
And tells them.
Tells them straight. Joe's whole Nashville approach, the session guys, the surprises, it just didn't align with how he wanted to produce the record. He proposed finishing it somewhere else.
Did the label push back?
Nope, they seemed to get it. Dag suggested they finish the album with Joe and the band at Sonnet's own studios in London. Maybe tie it in with some European shows.
And Kenny liked that idea.
Yeah, he figured having Joe on his turf in London might ensure a bit more cooperation from everyone involved, especially after the Nashville fiasco.
All right, so change of scenery, London sessions. How did those go?
Much, much better.
Uh-huh.
The memoir describes them as having way less pressure. Joe and the band, Solar System, performed admirably and professionally. Things just came together without all the drama.
Finally, a smoother path. So, recording done. Album title is The Sun Never Sets. Time to mix.
Exactly. Kenny takes the tapes to Sonnet's Park Studios in Sweden to mix the album himself.
And he had a specific process for mixing, right? Very detailed.
Very meticulous. Working late nights, cleaning up every little noise on the multi-track tapes,
Yeah.
Erasing tiny clicks, breaths, hums between musical phrases. It's painstaking stuff.
Okay, setting the scene for what the memoir calls a monumental disaster.
Oh, yeah. Monumental is right. One night, really late, like 2 a.m., he's working on a track called The Light That Shines the Brightest, focusing on Joe's harmonica part. And he's editing, trying to clean something up, and his mind wanders for just a second, and he hits the wrong button. Wipes the entire harmonica solo. Gone. Erased.
Oh my God, no. After everything they'd been through, how do you even recover from that? The artist isn't even there.
Pure panic at first, you can imagine. But then, okay, damage control.
Yeah.
He realized he couldn't re-record it. So he started listening back to the harmonica parts Joe played during the verses.
And tried to build a new solo from tiny pieces.
Exactly. He
Yeah.
spent hours, literally hours, finding little phrases, little licks from the verses, copying them, pasting them together to construct something that sounded like a solo. He even had to repeat one opening phrase 3 times to make it long enough.
That sounds incredibly stressful. He must have been absolutely convinced Joe would notice immediately. Like, hey, that's not the solo I played.
He was sure of it. Braced himself for the inevitable comment when Joe heard the mix. Joe never said a word, didn't notice, nobody else ever noticed either. Kenny just got away with it.
Wow. That's kind of amazing. A secret patch-up job hidden right there on the final record. So the album comes out. The Sun Never Sets. How did it do?
Commercially, not a huge hit. The source mentions it didn't have significant sales, although one single, Bad For Me, did get some minor action on the Billboard country charts.
And looking back now, years later, how does Kenny feel about the album itself, listening to it again?
He writes that listening back recently, he found it wasn't as bad for me, referencing the single title, as he maybe thought back then, given how tough the whole process was.
Which brings up that interesting question he asks himself in the memoir, doesn't it?
Yeah, that lingering thought. If that very first meeting hadn't been so confrontational, if they'd started off on a more respectful note, would the album have turned out significantly better?
It's impossible to know, but it makes you think about how much that initial dynamic affects everything that follows.
Absolutely. And it perhaps explains why, as the memoir notes, Kenny never spoke with or kept in touch with Joe Sun after the project wrapped. which was unusual for him. He usually stayed connected with the artists he produced.
And the memoir just notes Joe's son's passing.
Yeah, it concludes that section mentioning he passed away on October 25th, 2019, down in Palm Bay, Florida.
So what a ride. We've gone from that really awkward first meeting through the absolute chaos of those Nashville sessions.
Right, the surprise session players, the engineer swap, the Bluebird confrontation.
To finally getting the band involved, moving to London for a smoother finish, and then that secret 11th hour save during mixing in Sweden with the harmonica solo.
It's such a contrast, isn't it? You have Joe Sun, this established artist with hits, acting credits, future Grammy nods as a producer himself, and then you hear this story of the struggle, the personality clashes, the sheer difficulty involved in making this one record.
Yeah, this deep dive really highlights that invisible stuff that goes into an album. It's not just about the songs or the studio gear. It's this complex dance of personalities, navigating unexpected problems, making calls under pressure.
And sometimes, like with that harmonica solo, just finding a way to make it work, even if it's not exactly what was originally intended. It really shows how that producer-artist chemistry, or lack thereof, can just ripple through the whole process.
So considering all that, the compromises, the workarounds, that hidden fix, it kind of leaves you wondering, doesn't it? When you listen to any finished album, how much is the pure intended vision and how much is the amazing, sometimes accidental result of just navigating the chaos?
You can have my fancy suits and my shiny cowboy boots, 'cause where I'll be going, I won't need any shoes. You can have all I own, except my old guitar. Yes, this time I'm really leaving, 'cause you've pushed me too far. I've got me a ticket, and I won't be back. I'm saying goodbye without owing any debts. I'm leaving this whole world of cloudy skies and regrets. I'm going to a place where the sun never sets. You can have all the storm clouds. You've been raining on me. I don't want them anymore. Oh, this world of misery. You have growing so cold as a high timberline. Yes, you can take all your possessions and put them where the sun never shines. I've got me a ticket, and I won't be coming coming back. I'm saying goodbye. I don't own any debt. I'm leaving this old world of cloudy skies and regrets. I'm going to a place where the sun never sets. Yes, I'm going to a place where the sun never sets.